And this is a Fox News alert. Kyoto News is reporting that, according to the IAEA, radiation 1,600 times the normal level was detected 12 miles from Japan's Fukushima nuclear plant just moments ago. Now, that as efforts to manage the disaster at the plant came to a frightening halt today when smoke began billowing from the buildings that houses two of the plant's reactors. And for more on all of this, we go to our own Greg Palcott. He's standing by live in Osaka, Japan tonight. Greg.
Hey, Sean. Yeah, it is Tuesday morning here, and signs, as you noted, that we are not out of the woods at all when it comes to this nuclear crisis. Just in the last 45 minutes, we got those report of a white smoke or a haze or a steam coming from specifically reactor 2. That's one of the most troubled reactors in that complex, and that has halted all activity, repair work, spraying, whatever. Folks had to clear back, and now we see why. The latest report about those high levels of radiation, not at the plant, but 12 miles away. So one can imagine the levels right at the plant. One can suppose that. And one more word, a quote this morning from a top Japanese government minister saying that in fact, things are not necessarily improving at the plant. This, as this country has grappled with another angle of the story, and that is radiation in the food chain. Sales of milk and spinach, other vegetables from that broader area around the plants have been halted. That's when radioactive iodine, traces of which have been found in some of the samples there. They're also testing the water, the seawater, even the rain, and coming up with small traces. Again, no threat to the health, according to the government ministers, but worrying for the population here, worrying for the United States government and military as well, Sean. USS George Washington aircraft carrier and a second ship, a destroyer, left earlier than expected from a port south of Tokyo. The word, according to the U.S. Navy, is that they're trying to improve the readiness of the crafts. The backstory, what Fox News is, however, coming up with and confirming is that concerns, again, about radiation is wanting the U.S. military to put their ships a little bit out to sea. And finally, as we all know, that humanitarian challenge following the earthquake and tsunami continues. Police on Monday came up with new figures they think might be the death toll, and it's higher than we've been reporting, around 18,000. The price tag for all this, $235 billion. But again, breaking news again coming from that troubled nuclear reactor complex. Back to you, Sean.
All right, incredible news tonight, and sad in many respects. Greg, thank you for joining us. And joining me now with more on the major international crisis facing the president in both Japan and Libya, radio talk show host. She's nationally syndicated Fox News contributor Monica Crowley, Republican strategist Elise Jordan are with us. I think the thing that really stands out to me is how passive and disengaged this president is more than anything else.
I agree. When the Japan crisis happened, he did a lot of key battleground state interviews, but he didn't speak to the Japanese media immediately, and that lost some, credibility in my eyes because, he's speaking to, this is a major historic catastrophic.
The tsunami hadn't even receded, and he was on the golf course, Monica.
Yeah, I know. This is a president who's been criticized from all quarters now, including members of his own party, for great passivity, not just in these international crises of Japan's earthquake and tsunami, but the Middle East and the budget crisis and the deficit and the debt. There seems to be no sense of urgency or immediacy coming from this president.
Where is this coming from? And I think this is a really important question, getting into the mind of Barack Obama. Remember, when he was asked about American exceptionalism, his answer was, well, I'm sure the, Germans believe in German exceptionalism, and so believes in so-and-so exceptionalism, and the Brits. And I'm thinking, is it a belief system rooted in, maybe what he learned from Jeremiah Wright, maybe his radicalism and his background? In other words, he doesn't seem to think that it's America's responsibility to lead. And in that sense, he accepts America's passive role.
He seems to me to govern more like an academic, and he talks
point.
like a professor, and that's how he projects. And he doesn't ever want to offend, and he tries to be so cautious in his remarks, where he never really says anything one way or the other. And you see that with Egypt, you see it with Libya, you see it when he's announcing, he's going to triple troops in Afghanistan. And these are major issues. You're sending American men.
Is he voting present again?
It kind of seems that way to me. And with
That has certainly been his pattern. But you know what, Sean? I think it's even worse than what you described. I think that this is a man who comes out of the far-left progressive tradition in America that buys totally into the doctrine of American guilt. That not only is he uncomfortable with projecting American power and influence in the world, but that he actually believes that the United States is a force for bad, for evil in the world, and that he intends to take the United States down a notch or two. To diminish American power and influence.
I think you're on to something. I wouldn't quite say it the way you did, but when he went on the apology tour, it was very revealing. When America's arrogant, when he said at the United Nations that we don't have the right to impose our values. Well, wait a minute. I thought, our founding document believes that every human soul is endowed by their creator. So do you agree with that?
Well, the apology tour in Europe was supposed to, everyone loves Barack Obama, and it was supposed to net such great dividends with our allies. But then, you look at NATO troop commitments to Afghanistan. Did they really do anything? Did it, has it really netted anything with Libya and with building, a coalition of 5 allies versus in Iraq, at least it was 42.
There does seem to be a real disconnect between this president and the United States' traditional role in the world. We are the lone superpower, and when the United States, and this is the lesson of history, when the United States is perceived as weak, or the commander-in-chief is perceived as weak and indecisive, the wheels come off the world, and that's what we're seeing now. We know how these chapters end. They end very darkly.
And I got to tell you something. Imagine if Gaddafi stays in power.
Then what?
Well, then what? We're at war without saying we want to remove Gaddafi from power.
We will have lost a war to a third-rate dictator. Think about that. That's frightening.
And why have we committed
with American credibility? That's
committed at least $1 billion and maybe even American lives.
Good to see both of you. Thanks for being here. Time now to check in with Greta Van Susteren for a sneak peek of what's coming up in 19 short minutes when Greta goes on the record.
We're going to take the viewers on a worldwide trip. We're going to go to such places as Japan and Yemen. Plus tonight, Governor Pawlenty, in his first interview since his big political announcement, he's here. Senator McCain is here. Ehud Barak, the defense minister of Israel, is going to be joining us. Ambassador Bolton. So we have a jam-packed night tonight. Very serious things going on around the world. We have the very latest on every single one of them. Back to you, Sean.
We won't be missing Greta coming up in 18 short minutes. Louis Farrakhan rails against President Obama. That, much more, coming up on our great American panel. Next. And tonight on our great American panel, he's a syndicated op-ed columnist, Fox News contributor. Cal Thomas is back. He's worked on 3 U.S. presidential campaigns and dozens of Senate and gubernatorial and mayoral campaigns all across the country. And he even plays ice hockey. Democratic strategist Steve McMahon is here. She's worked in the White House under George W. Bush for media affairs. Mercedes Vienna Schlapp is back with us. All right, let's start. Louis Farrakhan explodes at President Obama. Watch this.
I warn my brother, don't you let these wicked demons move you in a direction that will absolutely ruin your future with your people in Africa and throughout the world. They don't like the way you handle Mubarak. They don't like the way you're handling the situation in the Arab world. You can't order him to step down and get out. Who the hell do you think you are? That you can talk to a man that built a country over 42 years and ask him step down and get out? Can anybody ask you? Well, there's a lot now going to ask you to step out of the White House because they don't want no black face in the White House. Be careful, brother, how you handle this situation because it is coming to America. It has already started.
Who the hell do you think you are?
Well, I think that Farrakhan is a little upset with President Obama, who he called the Messiah at one point, that the Messiah speaks through President Obama. And so, in essence, Farrakhan is basically saying, don't mess with my buddy Gaddafi. I mean, Gaddafi has given a lot of money, millions, to the Nation of Islam. And he actually went on air with them in 1985 at the conference and said, I will provide weapons to your black army to destroy white America. So these are very disturbing facts.
This is the same Farrakhan. Farrakhan, Reverend Wright, went to meet.
Well, he's got the Jeremiah Wright Award that was given to him in Trinity Church. So,
but of course, Obama knew nothing about it.
No, of course not. He separated himself.
Oh, my Lord. Here we go again, right? Let me just tell you two things. Barack Obama doesn't take advice from Louis Farrakhan, number one. And number two, every time Louis Farrakhan does something like this, it helps Barack Obama because it makes him look reasonable and it makes him look like he's doing the right thing to the voters who are going to decide the election. Reverend Wright and Louis Farrakhan, frankly, don't get this much attention.
Excuse me.
Except
20
when
years
they
in
go
his
off
church.
like this.
I'm not going to get into it, but 20 years in his church, I was fortified by him. He inspired me. He's my brother. I can no longer disown him than the black community. Cal, I think he thinks a lot more like Reverend Wright than he lets on.
Well, look, he represents a minority in the African-American community. There's no question about that. But he does represent a certain line of thinking within a certain segment of the African-American community. And I want to know why he's calling President Obama his brother. Now, is this a racial brother or is it a religious brother? Now, in evangelical and Christian circles, when you call someone a brother, it is someone of like faith. What does he mean by that?
Oh, come on, Cal. There may still be some white people in pointy hats somewhere in the South who happen to vote for Republicans, but that doesn't mean that a Republican should have to answer for the loony, crazy things that they say.
He's a
that's
rabid anti-Semite. He's a racist.
I know.
Farrakhan
He is. He's all those things.
Jeremiah Wright hung out with him, and he's friends with Jeremiah Wright. Why am I wrong to make that connection?
Why should we be associated?
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Why am I wrong? Wright and Farrakhan are friends. They meet with Gaddafi.
Right.
Obama sat with this guy for 20 years. GD America. America's chickens are coming home to roost. Why can't I ask these questions? Why? I don't believe the president when he said, I had no idea he was this radical.
We're here to talk about Reverend Wright, which we can do.
We're going to talk about the president.
Louis Farrakhan. But what we started out doing, though, essentially was we're saying that somehow there is some equivalence between Louis Farrakhan going off and Barack Obama's policy or the advice that he's getting. He doesn't listen to Farrakhan.
Well, and I mean, when you look at Reverend Wright's church and the black liberation theology, which Farrakhan supports, I mean, it does bring into question that Obama did sit there for 20 years. It's something you've covered on your show extensively. So, it's just things that you need to bring up.
Is this 7 degrees of separation?
Look, if you're a conservative, if you're
been in the same room together at various times, that doesn't mean anything.
I was fortified by him. He inspired me.
The clip that we just looked at.
I'm talking about Wright.
Okay, I think that
Wright, who's friends with Farrakhan. Wright, whose church honored Farrakhan. That same
There were some questions that were asked during the campaign that the president answered to the satisfaction.
Bill Ayers was a guy in the neighborhood. You accept that answer?
Pardon me?
Bill Ayers, the guy in the neighborhood that he gave speeches with, sat on boards with, started his campaign in his house.
So did the voters, Sean. They elected him president.
No, because the media and liberals like you never asked important questions. And I'm going to tell you what I believe. I believe that this president, if he ever let out his real views, I think they're far more radical, and I think he has hidden them from the American people.
I agree with that. You're known by your associates, at least in part. The people you hang around, the people you admire, the people who admire you. You can reach conclusions.
We got to take a break.
I admire Sean.
We'll come back, and we'll continue more with our Great American Panel straight ahead. And we continue now with our Great American Panel. All right, the vice president uses a rape metaphor to attack the GOP. When a woman got raped, blame her because she's wearing a skirt too short. She looked the wrong way. She wasn't home in time to make dinner. We've gotten by that, but it's amazing how these Republicans, the right wing of this party, whose philosophy threw us into this god-awful hole we're in, gave us this tremendous deficit we inherited, that they're now attempting to use the very economic condition they created to blame the victim. Putting aside the merits, Steve.
Are you coming to me on this one?
Steve.
I'm stepping back.
You defending that?
So, what do you say? Inelegant?
Inelegant?
Inelegant. The point no, I'm not going to defend it. The point he was making, though, I will absolutely defend because he's making the right point.
I know the $5 trillion in debt that Obama's accumulated, Cal, is George Bush's fault.
Yeah.
This is Obama's budget, Obama's debt and deficit. Yeah. 2.5 years later, they're still blaming Bush.
Well, Sean, you and I both know that if a Republican had used this kind of analogy, all the feminist groups would be calling for his head.
It's a conspiracy, I'm telling you. Conspiracy.
But look, they did name the Wilmington train station after him, so we can all be grateful for that.
And as a woman, it's very offensive. But it's an insult not only to Republicans, but to the majority of Americans who voted the Republicans in, who want this cut in federal government. And this is the guy that Obama's sending to negotiate with the Republicans. I mean, Obama needs to bench Biden.
Well, they sent him there.
I'm starting the campaign. Bench Biden.
Bench Biden.
No, I want Biden to keep going. Don't shut up. Just keep on going. But in all seriousness, he was supposed to negotiate the budget, then he took off. Here's my question. What do you make of all these Democrats now? Kucinich wants impeachment. all these Democrats that are furious that Obama, attacks Libya, doesn't consult Congress, doesn't consult anybody, contradicting his own position 3 days ago.
Well, again, I mean, he's a weakened president. He can't make a decision, and I think that really influences what we're seeing in Congress.
Why do you think that is? Why can't? Because he has core radical beliefs. Why can't he decide?
But he doesn't want to be a wartime president. He doesn't feel comfortable in the role of commander.
Then why did he do it?
Why did he do it? We got to ask Steve why he did it.
Listen, you can say he doesn't feel comfortable in the role of commander-in-chief, but the fact is he's executed the war in Iraq. He's bringing the troops home. He's going to bring the troops home from Afghanistan. He made a tough decision in Libya that wasn't going to make anybody happy.
Should he have gone to Congress first?
I think he probably should have gone to Congress first, but
instead of the United Nations.
But this Congress would have fought for 2 years, as they do on every single thing, and he wouldn't have gotten anywhere. He went to the United Nations.
I'd be honest.
It
he
wasn't
went there
a shoot first,
a
ask
day late and
questions
a dollar
later.
short.
Bush got approval in a hurry, but look, I'm starting to worry about myself when Dennis Kucinich is starting to make sense.
Right.
I think he's right. Look, the founders, founders wrote a constitution. There is supposed to be a legitimate role for Congress in going to war. This is war number 3. We can't afford it. And what is the end game in Libya? I don't know.
Look,
other than
I'm
oil.
not sure I support the War Powers Act, because I think there's times you have to act immediately and swiftly.
Well,
with that, Congress at some point...
This is not one of those times.
Yeah, Congress has a right to weigh in. They could do a number of things. They could defund the effort, number one. Number two, they can ultimately, if he doesn't abide by their will or their wishes or their constitutional authority, they could impeach him. I don't think any of the above is going to happen.
This is the way American foreign policy, though, has gone. The president has been given wide latitude, not just this president, but previous presidents, to act in the nation's interest, and then Congress has the ability to ask questions later, as Sean correctly points out.
And at the extreme of that, we get Vietnam.
And at the extreme, you do get
Sean
Vietnam.
correctly points out.
Well, I won't say it very often, but as Sean correctly poined out, in this one particular instance.
Limited instance, yes.
One limited instance.
Well, Mercedes, I think he's got a problem on his hand, because I don't think he wanted to do it.
Of course not.
I mean, Hillary is contradicting Gates, and Gates is contradicting Obama, and they've had different.
Well, and the women, I mean, Rice and Powers and Secretary Clinton, they're the ones coming out saying, we need to support the rebels, and they're too late. I mean, they really let Gaddafi strengthen, and the rebels have been weakened.
Why do I believe that Hillary? I know I'd never thought I'd say this. I would feel so much more confident with her as president.
I would too.
The United States policy of supporting democracies around the world has been the United States policy for a long time.
So we're going to after Mugabe, Sudan, and Bahrain next. Greta, coming up. See you tomorrow.